Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Eye on the Industry, the podcast where we explore the conversations shaping the future of eye care, leadership, and our industry as a whole. I'm your host, Christine Ziegel, and as always, I am joined by my amazing co-host, the one and only Isabelle Tremblay.
Hello, everyone, and we're so happy to be here today. Today's conversation is going to be packed with insights as we dive into modern optometry, digital influence, culture, leadership, and where the industry is headed as well.
Absolutely, and we are thrilled to welcome a guest who truly represents the future of our profession, Dr. Harbir Sian. Dr. Sian is an optometrist, clinic owner, educator, and digital creator. He is the host of his own podcast, the 2020 podcast, a strong advocate for optometry in Canada, and he's a leading voice in using social media to elevate patient education, professional visibility, and industry advocacy. He is passionate about the business of optometry, myopia management, and also helping optometrists build meaningful modern practices.
And Harbir has built a strong digital presence. He's deeply committed to elevating the profession, and he's always willing to dig into the conversations that really matter. So welcome again, Harbir.
Thank you so much, guys. Wow, that's quite the intro. Thank you. I feel like, can I pack you guys up and take you with me everywhere I go, and just you can introduce me to everybody every time I'm
Sure,
at
I
a
love
conference or
that.
something. Thank you. That's very, very kind of you. I'm humbled. Thank you so much. That was very kind.
Oh, you're so welcome, and thank you for joining us. We are thrilled to have you here with us today. So why don't we jump right in? And Harbir, we usually like to start our conversations on our podcast with some fun icebreaker questions. So if you're ready, can you tell us what your most interesting or unusual patient story is, or perhaps maybe an embarrassing moment?
Okay. You know what? One comes to mind. It's just a funny thing. Maybe not quite what you're thinking. But a few years back, I see quite a few kids, and we have two practices, both sort of primary care, and we see a lot of kind of all ages. But my practice personally has become a lot more kids because I do a lot of myopia management. And a few years back, I'm there, and I'm 10 years at this point into my career, so I'm not a new optometrist. But I have a family there. One kid's in the chair, another kid sitting over here with mom, and I'm looking at my computer and I'm trying to turn some knobs, and I was trying to calculate something in my head. And the kid that's sitting over here with mom whispers, I'm putting quote unquote whispers to mom, goes, "I don't think he knows what he's doing." And I just thought it was so funny because I'm like, you know what? In that moment, I was trying to figure something out, and the kid clearly picked it up.
Oh, that's
So
cute.
yeah, that was a good moment. And then I felt like I had to prove myself to like an 8-year-old,
Yeah.
that I do know what
Yeah.
I'm doing.
Little did he know, though, that you absolutely knew what you were doing, but that's
I think
very
I think
cute.
I knew what I was doing in the moment, but I still
Yeah.
remember that to this moment. Every day I remember that moment almost every single day, and I just think, what is this person over here thinking? I got to make sure I look professional, make sure I look like I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So, on a more serious note, in your eyes, Harbir, what is the most exciting shift that's happening in optometry right now?
I think I guess I'm going to go back to this throughout the conversation, but I think it's really exciting that we have all most of our provinces, if not all, are pushing for scope modernization, optimization. I know we use the word expansion, but we're trying not to use the word expansion because it makes it seem kind of aggressive or combative. But really what we're trying to do is just modernize our scope, what we're able to do in clinic, to the level of what our actual training already is in optometry. For example, we've been trained to prescribe oral medications. We've been trained to treat certain eye conditions like glaucoma and beyond. In some provinces, BC actually is kind of behind in a lot of these things. So I think it's cool that we're all pushing forward. It's exciting. Alberta usually is at the forefront of this, and they're usually ahead. And so we're always cheering for Alberta to kind of keep pushing their scope. So it shows other provinces and other stakeholders and organizations that it can be done, and it can be done safely. So that's super exciting right now.
That's great. And we've mentioned this a couple of times in your intro, Harbir, but you have a very strong digital presence, and I think we can all learn from you. But I want to know why you think that digital and social media becomes an essential tool for modern optometrists today?
The easy answer to that is just that the world is just shifting to spend more time online, right? So there's TikTok and Instagram and beyond. More and more people, it's not just young kids, but obviously the younger you get, the more time they're on digital devices. But people into their 40s and 50s and beyond they're maybe using different platforms. My aunt and uncle are sending me videos still off of Facebook. I don't use Facebook that much, but they're on Facebook enough that they're sharing videos with me, and people around my age and younger are using Instagram and then TikTok and so on. So first of all, it's just that pretty much everybody's on these platforms, and that we want to connect with the public to educate them. We want to connect with the public to bring in more patients and more customers to our businesses, and that's where most of this is happening. The cost of customer acquisition or the cost of advertising on these digital platforms is significantly less than trying to advertise through traditional media, right? Radio and TV and so on, and newspaper, print and whatnot. So that's the easy answer. The other answer is, maybe I'll dive into a little bit more later, but I'll just tease it. But for somebody who's trying to create a presence for themselves in the industry, so not public facing now, but industry facing, I still think there's a huge opportunity in this space to brand yourself as an important or influential person. I think that's a really good use of digital platforms as well.
Yeah. And it's interesting because many optometrists are telling us that they're intimidated by social media. What do you think holds them back? And what are some small first steps that they can take to get them started?
I was dabbling in social media and all these things for a long time, but really made a concerted effort to dive in and make it a thing. So now I'm kind of known as this guy, but that really started with a very, very deliberate thing, actually a specific conversation I had with my wife at the very end of 2018. So it's been a while now. And I said to her, I think there's an opportunity for me here. So in 2019, I'm going to start putting my face out there a lot more. I want to make sure you're okay with it, because she's not such a public, she uses social media, but she doesn't really use it nearly to the extent that I do. And so she thought that was a little strange, but I was like, give me some time to prove it to you. And if you see that it's worth it, then I'll keep doing it and, lean into it. We found out we were that week, shortly after I told her this, we found out that we were pregnant with our second child. And she's like, well, you got 9 months. So until this baby's born, you can prove to me that this social media thing is actually a real thing. So that was great to have a little timeline there. But what I did was, I actually wasn't, as weird as it might sound, I wasn't that comfortable with putting myself out there. I'd put photos of myself out there, but I wouldn't put myself out there on video and try to be outspoken and all these things. And so my goal was that year, I'm going to do 30 days straight of posting a little video on Instagram stories at the time. And so if we know Instagram stories, they're only live for 24 hours and you can take them down whenever you want, and they can be stories are usually a bit more raw. They don't have to be polished. And so it gave me an opportunity to just post something. And I just decided, okay, challenging myself to 30 days straight, talk about whatever, ideally something educational, ideally something eye care related, but it doesn't have to be. And so I did that, and I ended up running that for about 100 days straight after I realized I kind of got into a rhythm, and it was a great way for me to get comfortable holding the camera right here in front of my face and speaking to the camera. It was a great way to force myself to come up with new content, and come up with new ideas. And then it also helped me see which stories got more engagement, what topics were more interesting, or what tone of voice was I using that was more interesting. So it was a bit of trial and error. So that's what I recommend when I'm on stage and I'm talking about digital marketing or branding. That's the number one thing I say to ECPs is just start really small, make a short video. It could be 10 seconds, do it on a story so it's not permanent, so to speak, and just get comfortable doing that. And I want to give a quick shout out, if it's okay, to a friend of mine, Dr. Harbir Sian in Toronto, because he's trying to build his presence, right? And he's doing he has built, I should say. But when he started, he challenged himself to do 365 days straight of posting an actual post on Instagram. And I don't know how far in. He's got to be a couple hundred days in now. He's not maybe a full year yet, but he's gotten so comfortable with it that it's just automatic to him now.
Yeah.
And he's trying to take the next step and so on. So I think it's just a matter of challenge yourself to get into a little bit of a rhythm, get comfortable. And I tell people it doesn't have to be anything fancy, right? Hey guys, look at this amazing new frame that we just got in from XYZ company. I love the color. If you want to learn more, give us a shout. It's like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, post that.
Right.
Start small and go from there.
Great
Yes.
advice.
Well, if optometrists, eye care professionals want to learn how to handle social media, I think they could look at your social media handles as an example. I'm not on TikTok as much, but I recently saw one of your video on TikTok and it made me laugh so hard. So thank you for that.
Which one was that?
It's a video where you were like running back into the
Oh, yeah.
office and
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, that
yeah,
one was
it
funny.
made me laugh and that's what you want TikTok
Yeah.
to be about. So yeah, I'm gonna try to learn from this and change my approach a little bit on TikTok.
Well, if I could
But
say
where do
one
you
other thing about that, Isabel, is like that video, I stole that idea from some other random, like a dentist or something. So just take what you think it works, whatever aligns with how you feel. Do you want it to be more comedic? Do you want it to be more serious? I take ideas from my staff, they'll send me a video and say, "What do you think about doing this video?" And if I think it aligns, then we'll do it, right? So don't be afraid to steal ideas from other people on social media as well.
Yes, absolutely. And where do you think is the biggest opportunity for optometrists to use digital content to educate, advocate, and shift public's perception as well?
As far as digital platforms,
Yes. If you have a digital platform in particular to recommend, and
mm,
I'd be curious even yourself, like are you more right now on Instagram or I see you've been more present on TikTok, but
yeah,
any
I
recommendations would be great.
I would say whichever platform feels more natural for you. So for me, Instagram feels more the most natural. I think it's just an age thing, a timing thing. So when, 10 years ago when I was really getting into social media, Instagram was really the up and coming platform. And
Yeah.
then shortly after that, TikTok, a few years down the road, TikTok became a bigger thing. But when TikTok became a thing, it was a lot more of the dancey type videos. And I was not going to
Yes.
do that. So I didn't use TikTok at all. But then a little while later, I thought, well, the least I could do is take what I recorded on Instagram and then just repurpose it on TikTok. And so that's one thing I would highly, highly recommend is whatever platform you pick, just repurpose that content on the other platforms as well, because you just never know where it's going to hit. So that one that you're mentioning, Isabel, about I throw something at a person, they come chasing after me, I'm running back into my office. That one did well on both platforms, but it did better on TikTok. I did a few educational videos a few years ago that they did pretty well on Instagram. They got like 20,000 views, 30,000 views, but on TikTok they went like legitimately viral and had like millions of views. And so,
Wow.
like, you just don't know when it's going to land, where it's going to land. So the best thing you could do is film the one piece of content and just post it everywhere and just see what happens.
Yeah, it's definitely a good way to learn and see what sticks. And interesting that different social media platforms get more hits and more views, and we're learning that with our podcast too,
Yeah,
and where we're getting more followers.
that's great.
So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
it's interesting.
The answer to all of this, honestly, consistency is the key. If I go back to my 30 days in a row and I talk about what Clavier is doing and now I'm sharing, consistency to me means multiple things. It means doing it regularly. Of course, with the podcast, that's a huge factor as well. But then also posting it across the platforms is a form of consistency as well, right? You're showing up on all the platforms and you just never know when it's going to click with which person. The only way to do it, and I don't want it to sound overwhelming, whatever your cadence is, right? You want to post once a week or 5 times a week or whatever it might be. Just try to keep consistent with that. And that's when the results will show. It's rarely you post one amazing post and you become famous, right? It's hardly ever that. It's usually going to be this sort of slow growth, and then you hit a point where the trajectory changes. But that little hockey stick effect doesn't happen. You don't know when it's going to happen. It's just you got to stick with it.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, good advice. So then we'll switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk about scope expansion. So, from your perspective, what is helping push things forward in Canada, and what, in your opinion, are some things that are still getting in the way?
I think I'll answer the second question first. I think we are getting in our own way most of the
Mm.
time. There are obvious entities out there that are objecting to our scope expansion and modernization. And usually it's going to be the people whose territory we're starting to encroach upon, right? Ophthalmology being the kind of, you don't have to beat around the bush. Ophthalmology is usually going to be the organization or entity that's going to argue against them. They're going to kind of oppose what we're trying to do, and understandably so. Like, I can't be mad at an ophthalmologist for potentially, like, for saying these guys are trying to take our territory, but we're not actually trying to do that. That's the problem. That's the kind of the wrong mindset. What optometry is trying to do is just provide better access to care and lower the cost and the barrier to entry to care for a lot of people and for the government ultimately. If a patient goes to their GP, they go to the pharmacist, they get referred to an ophthalmologist. So they go to the pharmacist and they go to the GP, then they get referred to an ophthalmologist and they get treated for something that is kind of a run-of-the-mill thing, a day-to-day thing that I could treat in my clinic right now today. How much did that cost? They had to go to the GP, that cost the government a visit, or they went to the pharmacist probably billed for that, and because the pharmacists can do that now, right? GPs would have billed it, and then the ophthalmologist billed it. Instead, they could have come to me. I would have probably asked the patient to pay a little bit out of pocket and bill the government a little bit. And ultimately, they would have been seen the same day, had the issue resolved, and the government would have only billed once and at a smaller amount than all of the other stuff accumulated. So it just makes sense a lot of times to streamline this. Certainly not asking to do surgeries and, invasive procedures and things like that. That is absolutely the purview of ophthalmology. But there's a lot of benefit to the public, to the government, to insurance companies. Everybody kind of wins, honestly, and even ophthalmology, because then these types of issues, they don't have to bog down their schedules with seeing these follow-ups and these small things and these more routine things. They can focus on the more complicated things that they're trained for. So it really ends up being better for everybody. But to go to your question, like, I think we ourselves as optometrists need to believe that first, and then
Right.
we can all pull in the same direction. And I think that is actually what's been good is lately we've had more and more people pulling in the same direction. As I was saying, provinces have proposals on the table. Multiple provinces are meeting with the government or getting close to having proposals being accepted. So it's really exciting that right now it feels like a time where optometry is more cohesive than ever, but there still are, it sort of boggles my mind when an optometrist says, well, why are we doing this? Like, why do we need to push our scope forward? And
Yeah.
the answer to that I have is, like, you don't have to do these procedures. You don't have to do lasers. You don't even have to prescribe orals if you don't want to. But that doesn't mean that the whole profession shouldn't have the opportunity to do that. If you have somebody practicing in rural BC or Saskatchewan or somewhere, they have to send their patient 3 hours away so they can get treated for this thing. Why not have that optometrist have their scope legally, be able to practice to this level so they can treat that patient? I don't want to restrict that person just because I don't want to do it in my office. I don't want to restrict my profession 10 years down the road just because today I don't feel like doing that procedure. We have to look at it much bigger. And ultimately, if we are not always pushing to grow, we are not going to stay the same. We are going to contract. We're going to constrict, because there's always something that's pushing. On one end, we're growing. On the other end, there's something else that's kind of taking up our territory as well. And we have to kind of have that perspective of always moving forward. Otherwise, we don't just stay status quo. We actually start to shrink.
That is that's so true, and I love your vision about thinking bigger. And now we're going to talk about a topic that I know you're very passionate about: myopia management. I know you're a leader in your practice. There's leaders like you, but we know that not every clinic or optical practice in Canada has adopted myopia management. So I'd like to get your thoughts on why do you think that is? And, both from a clinical and a business standpoint, why are there still practices or offices that don't really implement myopia management?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons for that. First of all, it's funny. I know you say I am passionate about myopia management. I feel like I probably came across being pretty passionate about scope expansion as well there for a sec. I have a habit of stepping on my soapbox and really like preaching. And I never want to come across as I never want to like belittle somebody who maybe is not on the same page or feeling as passionately about it as I am. But I feel like if I don't speak as passionately, then if I speak passionately, let me put it this way, then I might awaken something in somebody who maybe has a little bit of a small flame that's there. And if I can kindle that, I think, I want to give it a try. So myopia management, certainly something that I'm passionate about. As I mentioned, I see a good chunk of my patients are young patients now, probably half. I think probably it's around 50% of my patients are under the age of 15, maybe under the age of 12, because I've slowly sort of curated this patient base. Dr. Sherman Tung is an optometrist here in Vancouver. I'm not sure if you know who he is, but He is one of the leaders in myopia management globally, not just in Vancouver, not just in Canada. Really great guy, and he's been a bit of a mentor to me in this sort of myopia management journey of mine. And he said something to me a couple of years back that's kind of stuck with me, which is, we talk about treating ocular disease like glaucoma and cataracts and retinal macular degeneration, stuff like that. We're treating those in 50, 60, 70-year-olds. But what if we could rewind the clock and reduce the odds of somebody developing those things, right? It's like stepping in a time machine and going back to when that human being, the 60-year-old, is now 5 years old. And we have a
Mm.
chance to potentially reduce the risk of those diseases developing
Yeah.
in the future. It sounds like some kind of like fairy tale or sci-fi, but that's actually what we're doing with myopia management, right? I think the problem is we look at myopia management as myopia as a refractive condition, right? -1, -2, but really it's an ocular disease that causes a refractive condition. The refractive component is actually secondary. The ocular disease is the primary. And I think if we shift our mindset, we start seeing this 6-year-old in front of us as a potential macular degeneration patient 60 years from now. Well, I'm going to treat that differently. And I think that's how we should be looking at it, because we know, I'm not going to spew the numbers here out first because I don't remember the exact numbers, but like we've all heard them, right? Every diopter equals an X percent or X times increase in macular retinopathy or risk for macular retinopathy in the future, or X percent increase in glaucoma in the future. If I'm reducing the progression of myopia by a millimeter of axial length progression or a diopter of refractive error progression, I'm reducing the risk of those diseases in the future. So that's the way I look at it. And honestly, I love it because it's measurable. You pull up this growth chart every time the parent and the patient are in front of you. You pull up this growth chart of axial length and you say, look, this is the date we implemented the treatment. And you can see the rate of change has declined in the last 6 months to a year since we implemented this treatment. Look, the rate of change in the refractive error the rate of change has declined since we implemented a treatment. It's really cool. It's very tangible. Whereas when we're treating a condition like macular degeneration, glaucoma, stuff like that, sometimes it's not as tangible. It's a bit more like, we're treating it, but you can't see the difference right now. I can't show you the difference. Whereas in myopia, I can often show parents, what we're actually doing and how it's helping.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow. There's a lot there.
There is a lot there. Sorry. You know what I tell people when I go on somebody else's podcast? I say you have to be careful when you bring a podcast host on your podcast, because podcast hosts have a tendency to talk. At least I do have a tendency to give you very long answers. So I apologize.
Oh, don't
Mm,
apologize. The answers are great, and that's why we want to give this platform, because I think it's a lot of very important information that we can communicate out to the industry. Okay, I'm going to shift gears again, and I want to ask you a question. I want to talk about your experience in terms of culture in clinics. You've
Mm-hmm.
observed a lot of practices in clinics, and so what separates those clinics with strong, healthy culture from the ones that actually struggle with those
Yeah,
stronger cultures?
that's a great question. There are a few words that come to mind. Sorry, this is how my brain works. I think of words that sort of encompass like certain
yeah.
ideas or thoughts. The number one word that comes to mind is empathy. The second word that comes to mind, actually, I think maybe this is like a theme here, but consistency. And
Yeah.
consistency has a few different meanings, right? In terms of like how you reward behavior or discipline behavior, there's got to be consistency. It's almost like when you have a child, if you're not consistent in how you approach certain situations, they're not going to know how to behave when they're out in public or when they're, doing this certain activity. And so that applies in business as well. What else? Let me go back to the empathy thing for a second. Then there's actually something I learned from someone else that I want to share in a moment as well. But I think empathy is the number one thing by far. Like it's like empathy, then a huge gap, and then like consistency and the other stuff. Because if you come into work with empathy or any situation with empathy, it is always going to go so much better. Always. Then it might
Sure.
still not work out, whatever the thing is, but it's always going to go way better than if you don't approach it with empathy. So, of course, empathy is like putting yourself in the other person's shoes, trying to understand their situation. Why did a person, and I think the other thing is like when something doesn't go well, instead of saying, hey, Isabel, like what happened? What did you do there? Versus how about we try to understand what happened in this situation? What was the person, how did you feel? What was the reason for this behavior versus strictly pointing the finger and blaming the person, kind of separating the situation from the human being a little bit. I find that that works really well. But the consistency part, one thing that we've implemented in our practice that I've learned from other people is very, very regular meetings and very regular touch points. So we do weekly meetings. We made a point last year at some point to prioritize meetings and prioritize our staff, our team above everything else. Meaning, so we block 1 hour of patient care time every week to sit down with the staff every week, 1 hour. And when I did it initially, my office manager was like, "What are you doing? You're going to lose money like blocking an hour of patient care time." But it has to be a priority. And of course, the ROI is much greater than whatever that 1 hour of patient care time, whatever the revenue would generate in the hour. If your staff is like really, if they feel appreciated and they're working at the top of their game, you're going to make that money back multiple fold. And we certainly have seen that. So that consistency of meetings, touching base with staff, how you talk to staff, how what your goals are, setting the goals with the staff, and those meetings help you do all those things. Those are all important in developing the culture and the practice. And if I can share the one other thing that I learned from somebody named Kevin Wilhelm. I don't know if you know Kev by
Yeah.
any chance.
He's been on our as
Yeah,
well.
awesome.
Yes.
So Kev's an awesome guy. He's a legend. He's obviously a very successful business person.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Kev told me this when I was asking him about culture, and I've asked him if I could use this. I've used this. I don't know if he maybe shared this by chance, but I can try to remember it now off the top of my head. But to him, culture was three things. It was your norms, your rituals, and there were three things. But what I say when I do a lecture is like when you go to a new country, they have their own culture. Their own culture is comprised of all these different things of how you greet each other every day. What do you celebrate? What are the important things that are ingrained in your culture? That's your office as well, right? So how do I greet my staff, or how do my staff greet each other every day, or how do they greet patients? Those are kind of the norms. What do we celebrate? Do we celebrate birthdays and anniversaries and things like that? Do we celebrate goals that we've reached? These are all part of our culture as well. And understanding these norms and rituals and things like that in your day-to-day business, I think are really helpful to develop the culture.
And those are big things, to your point, that you can consistently demonstrate. And it's a big deal. The way, you greet your staff, the fact that you're celebrating birthdays, recognize and wish one of your team members a happy birthday, but the way it makes them feel is just it's amazing. And
Your core values, developing that and using that as your North Star is super important. So when we have a conversation with our office manager, for example, and she says, or one of our team members, and they say, well, I believe they're asking for a raise. Well, okay, cool. Let's talk about what our core values are and how are we achieving our goals together, and what is it that we're doing, and where does your raise fall in? Or if we're hiring somebody and they maybe don't exhibit some of those core values that we believe are really important, like empathy, for example, then perhaps we do hire based on that, or we have conversations with our team based on that if they're not living up to those core values. Very important.
And what you said about empathy resonated so much because so many businesses and corporations hire based on skills as opposed to emotional intelligence. And that's
Mm,
costing, North American companies so much because, if you hire a leader that lacks emotional intelligence, you can teach skills, but not emotional intelligence is a little harder to teach.
absolutely.
So having said this, leadership expectations are evolving. So what do you think, Harbir, the modern clinic leader needs to bring to the table in 2026 and beyond?
Well, I sorry to sound like a broken record. I'm going to say empathy again. But I had a conversation recently with somebody who works on these types of things with, my podcast is often a source of my own knowledge. I learn from all the guests that I bring on, but we were talking about that. And I think with right now in the workplace, there's especially, I use my own office as an example. There's multiple generations, age groups, right? So I am like at the older end of the millennial age group, and what's next after millennial? Gen Z. And then,
I think you're right. Yes,
right?
Gen
And
Z.
then like we're even getting like almost not quite, but like we're starting to get like that the really young Gen Zs, almost the Gen Alphas, who like you don't even understand what they're saying sometimes because it sounds like they're speaking a different language. But but you have to learn to kind of relate. Most of our team are in their early 20s, right? There, I have it was kind of weird to me. I realized the other day I have multiple staff who were born in the 2000s, and I'm like, holy cow! I was starting optometry school when you were born. That's crazy to me. So it's wild. So I have to learn to try to relate. I don't need to speak that language, but I just need to understand what motivates them, what makes them tick, what bothers them, and there certainly are very different sensitivities, very different. I cannot speak to, I mean, most of the time, and everybody's different, but I can't speak to a 20-year-old the way that I speak to 40-year-old, because a 40-year-old I know they grew up in the same era as me. I know what they've kind of been through, generally speaking. I know what their exposure to technology was and when it was. I can speak to them a bit more directly, but a 20-year-old basically was pretty almost born with a phone in their hand. You know what I mean? Like they have a different exposure, different level of social exposure, and these types of things. So we have to speak to them differently. So that all starts with empathy. And I think understanding slight differences or sometimes large differences in the generations. And yeah, there are going to be times where I get frustrated, where I say, well, it doesn't make sense, that behavior or that reaction. But I have to step back from that and say, okay, well, let me learn a little bit more about why they reacted that way, and I can move forward from there. And then move forward knowing that I have to approach certain situations with this person in this way and with this person in this way. I can make this joke with this person, but I can't make it with that person. These are all things you just kind of have to be aware of.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to bring up digital tools again, whether that's social media platforms or online patient education or any automated types of communication that you do. And how can those things support and enhance your team culture instead of competing with it?
Well, I think with again our team generally being younger, I think implementing some sort of digital tools and having them is going to be more engaging for them versus some of the more traditional ways of approaching things. And first of all, let me take it from two different perspectives. From our EMR perspective, um, having digital tools that streamline how the certain systems in the office, that's just good for everybody. And that actually is good for culture. That's important I did a lecture on burnout not too long ago. That's important in terms of burnout. One of the big things that contributes to burnout is all these random admin tasks that we have to do. And there's just so many of them all the time. Having a
Yeah.
good EMR system and overall just systems in your practice that help streamline those things so it's not such a burden. Nobody wants to have to kind of click, drag all day long, like bookkeeping or data entry type stuff all day long. That's not fun for anyone. So when things can get automated, that's easier and it lets people be humans and engage in the workplace in a better way versus just staring at a screen, clicking a button all day long. So that's really important. And it's really cool that there's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of platforms out there that streamline patient communication, that streamline communication between doctors' offices, recalls, things like that. So, that's been helpful for us. Getting Google reviews, we kind of gamified this a little bit with our staff, and we gave it to our staff to find interesting ways to get patients to leave more Google reviews, and they got rewarded based on how many Google reviews we got. And in the last like 6 months, we like doubled the number of Google reviews we had just because of like the staff were so engaged on like finding interesting new ways to do it and giving them the space to use different platforms.
Mhm.
So that's one way. The other way is I ask my staff to get involved. I mentioned that I get my staff to send me ideas on social media types of things that we can do, but I also ask them to be in it. And I'm not in all of the videos and I don't want to be in all of the videos. I want them to do it. I want them to come up with an idea, run it by me just so I know what's going on. But then go film it, then show me when it's done, right? Like, and it's fun for them. You can hear them sort of giggling about it and they go check how many views it got after. It's fun and it keeps the staff engaged. So I think there's a lot of ways that helps. And I didn't realize this initially, but they came back to me and told me like, we love that you do this. It's so different than other offices and it
Yeah.
makes it fun for us. I'm like, cool, great. Let's keep it going.
Keep it going. Yeah, for sure. It is fun. And if they're enjoying doing that and that makes them feel part of, something bigger, I think that's amazing. That's
Yeah.
great
And I mean,
culture.
ultimately it's not just for fun, right? It's actually helping the business grow by getting us more engagement online.
Right.
Yeah. And talking about fun, because Christine and I, we love to have fun, and we're
I know
getting
that. Oh, I
closer.
know that.
Yes, yeah, we're famous for that. But we're getting closer to the end of the podcast, and we like to end with a few fun questions. So, Harbir, if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing in the optical industry or optometry tomorrow, what would it be?
If I could change one thing in the optical industry, I would want to I would want to somehow find a way to help the public understand the importance of eye health.
Mhm.
Because I think unfortunately the public perception right now is too much about us just being refractionists, optometry specifically, but even in general, like most of the public are not aware of how much is happening inside this little eye, like this 1 inch circle inside your head, right? How incredibly intricate and complicated, and it's like its own little universe in there, not just for optometry, but for ophthalmology, for opticians, like how much work actually goes into glasses and contacts have been so commoditized that I think the perception of all these three professions within eye care have been sort of lost a little bit. So I wish we could magically just educate everybody on how important our eyes are, and how valuable our sight is because we take it for granted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good answer.
Thank you. A shameless little plug. If you like that answer, then I did a whole TED talk on that, so you can go check that out.
Definitely
Yes.
your TED Talk. I knew
Yes.
that. Absolutely. All right. So this brings us to our fun rapid fire round of questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Coffee or tea?
You know what's funny? Can I just show you this? I know it's supposed to be rapid fire. There's gonna be some video of this at some point. So I had my coffee, and then my wife stopped by, and she's like, "I made tea," so she gave me a cup of tea. So I have both, but I'm definitely I'm definitely a coffee person, number one for sure.
Yeah. I guess like you can never get enough caffeine, right?
Well, if I'm home, like if I'm not in the clinic, I'll usually have 2 cups of coffee a day. But if I'm at clinic, I literally only have one. I make a cup of coffee at like 7 a.m. It lasts me until like 3 in the afternoon. That's it. I just
Wow.
have the 1 cup of coffee. Yeah. I know some people think that's gross, but
No,
Well,
no, I can
you
relate.
probably you probably like iced coffee, you know?
Yeah.
I know I reheat it. Actually, I got as a Christmas gift, I got this. I don't have it with me right now. I got this fancy mug that keeps the coffee warm. Handy during the winter.
Yeah. Sounds
Yeah.
great. And do you prefer sweet or savory food?
I'm more savory.
Okay.
What's your favorite comfort food?
Ooh, I'm a pizza kind of guy, but also there's some Indian food my mom makes that pretty much can't be topped. So
Yeah. Love Indian food. Are you more of a morning person or a night creature?
neither.
Neither.
These days, I'm like bed by 10 and then just sleep as long as I can. I would say these days, I'm more an evening person though, for sure. Yeah. I can't do the early mornings now lately.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know if it's this time of year, but sleep is definitely, oh, it's such an important thing. I
Mhm.
Yeah.
can't get enough of it these days.
When you have 3 kids also, it's just like by the time like 9 p.m. hits, I'm like tucking my 3-year-old, I'm tucking her into bed. I'm like, I'm just gonna go to sleep right now. It's 8 p.m.
Yeah.
I'm good to go to bed right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Okay. Your go-to way to unwind after a long clinic day.
Oh, I usually don't get to unwind until like 9 p.m. after the kids are in bed.
Right.
So it'll be like probably if I have actually the time to do this, I would throw just Netflix on and just relax for an hour. But
Love
I'm gonna be
it.
honest with you, my version of unwinding is I'll put on like Stranger Things in the background and I'll have my laptop out and I'll be doing something work, podcast, who
Yeah.
knows what, and I'll do that for like an hour or two and then I'll go to bed. That's my average evening.
Yeah.
Nice.
No, that sounds great. My next question would be about, I don't know if you have, a bag that you carry around, or I call them MERS, a purse for men, or a backpack. What do you always keep in your bag?
This
That's
is my
perfect.
bag that I
Bag,
carry
yeah.
around.
It's a very
What do I
nice
keep
bag.
in it? Well, since I have it
Yes.
here, my laptop's usually in here, but it's out here. Glasses, anti-fatigue, what that tells you about my age. I have an interesting pair of forceps here that I use for various things, but most recently for amniotic membranes.
Ah.
Second pair of glasses and and wireless
course.
microphones. That's about. Oh, and then I have this. I have a kit a quick little aside. I know this is supposed to be rapid fire. I'm diving into this sort of world of neuro. So I have this little kit of different tinted lenses and prisms that I just keep in my bag. So no matter which clinic I'm at, if a patient tells me they're having some sort of, I don't know, whatever, concussion, migraine, other types of, vertigo, dizziness type symptoms, I'm like, well, I have these prism with me. I can probably just do some testing. So I have a bunch of that stuff packed in my bag.
Wow. You don't travel light.
No.
No.
Yeah, I know. But I'd like to
Awesome.
be prepared.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay. Next question. If you weren't an optometrist, what career do you think you'd be amazing at? Or what career would you be in?
I would love to be a professional soccer player.
Really?
That would be my, that'd be my number one. That's like my childhood dream. Yeah. So, but beyond that, I mean, I love this. I love creating content. I love podcasts. I love educating. I would probably, I would love to dive into the world of, Isabel was saying she's working on a keynote. I'd love to dive into that kind of world. Where I
Yeah.
could be maybe a keynote speaker. You know what Isabel was saying, she's written a book. First of all, how much effort does that take? That's crazy how much time that takes. And then, she's preparing this keynote. I don't have the time to do all of those things, to really become a professional in that space. I'm an amateur in this space right now. I'm happy with where I'm at because this is how much time I have. But if I was to really, if I had like all day to kind of lean into it, I would dive into that world. There's somebody I became friends with just luckily through the eye care industry. His name is Sean Kanungo. He's from Edmonton. I don't know if you've heard his name by any chance.
Yeah.
He was at Transitions
He was
Academy a
at
few times.
Transitions, yeah. And so that's actually where Sean and I met. But I try to message him when I can to just be like, man, the quality of content that you put out there is so incredible, so impressive. That would be my goal, is to become like that level of speaker and content creator. But it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money. He's investing in his video crew being with him and editing all his content and stuff like that. But that's the kind of stuff. If I could tell a really quick story about Sean, the first time he spoke at Transitions, I think he even told this story on stage that year, but I was going to Transitions. I think this was my first or second time going to Transitions Academy, and I was connecting through Toronto. He's coming from Edmonton, also connecting through Toronto. I was sitting in the food court area eating a burger. And like, as I'm taking this giant bite out of this burger, this guy walks up to me. He goes, "Hey, are you Harbir?" And I was racking my brain about who is this guy? Okay,
My
where do I
God.
know him from? Sometimes I forget faces. And he's like, "You don't know me, but I know you." And I was like, wow, that's okay, interesting. He's like, "You have a podcast." And I was like, there's no way my podcast is that big that some random person who's not an optometrist knows who I am. But some of his best friends are actually optometrists. And so he knew me a little bit through that circle plus the podcast. And he was researching before he came to Academy to do his keynote. So we connected there in the airport in YYZ. And then I got to know him a little bit better at Academy. And then he came again the next year. And so we've stayed in touch. So that was kind of a funny story about Sean, but that's something I love doing right now that I would love to dive into more.
I know you would be amazing at it, and I
Thank you.
remember Sean mentioning you during his keynote as well.
Yeah.
So you are well connected. Harvey, what's one word people would use to describe you? Just one word.
Tall.
Sorry.
That's true.
Right, you are.
Yeah, so most people don't know until they see me in person that I'm tall, but I would hope something like energetic. I think people do tell me one word that I know that come up over the years is I'm an enabler, and that does come up often. So if you want to get into trouble, just make sure Harbir's around and we'll make sure that it'll happen. Also, if you want to do something good and you have a big idea and you want someone to cheerlead for you, that's also, I'm an enabler in that sense too. But like if we're in Vegas and you want to have a good time.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
It was our pleasure, really. And this conversation was exactly what the industry needs. It was thoughtful, future focused, and really full of a lot of valuable insight.
Yeah, absolutely, Harbir, and your perspective, and whether it's on digital presence, leadership culture, evolution, everything you said about empathy and optometry is something we know our listeners will really appreciate.
Yes, exactly. And thank you to everyone who has tuned in today. As always, we're grateful that you joined us for another episode of the Eye on the Industry podcast. And we hope today's discussion inspires you to keep learning, to stay curious, and to continue elevating the work that you do every day.
Yeah. And if you've enjoyed this episode, I always say make sure you hit that subscribe button and make sure you follow and share it with someone that you think could benefit from this important discussion.
Yes, for sure. And as always, we'd also like to send a sincere thank you to our media partner, OPTIK Magazine, for supporting this episode and helping us bring these important industry conversations to life. We have more incredible guests and powerful conversations coming up, so make sure that you stay tuned. But until next time, stay sharp, stay focused, and keep your eye on the industry. Bye for now, everyone.